Hi guys, this is Christine, your relationship and mindset master doctor and your leverage for change. So today I'm going to come to speak about the anxious preoccupied individual and the differences between the anxious preoccupied and the fearful avoidant individual. I noticed that even in dealing with some of my clients, that these two are sometimes mistaken for one for the other, and I wanted to give some kind of some indications of some of the differences that will help you to kind of differentiate between the two. First of all, the anxious is the fearful. I will start with. The fearful avoidant attachment style individual usually is a mix of the anxious and the dismissive. If you've seen previous videos, you'll notice that the fearful avoidant attachment style individual has this an anxious side and a dismissive side. However, there are also variations in that, with perspective to the two, the anxious and the dismissive. Even though the fearful has both sides, it is also going to depend on the person that they're in partnership with. For example, if a fearful avoidant is in a relationship with a dismissive individual, then what will happen is that they are going to more experience that relationship from a more the anxious side of this attachment style. Whereas if the fearful is in a relationship with an anxious person, they will more experience the relationship from a dismissive side, right? So if you want to just go back and look at some videos that kind of give you more details on the anxious and the dismissive, that way I don't have to spend a lot of time kind of explaining those two. But really, just to understand that the fearful avoidant attachment style is a mix. Kind of a mix. And remember guys, everything is along a spectrum, so everybody has a different makeup. There are different makeup of these two different attachment styles. The one that you're going to operate from more is the one that you're most identified with. All right, so if you're on the spectrum and you're really highly dismissive, that's how you're going to be in a relationship. You're going to be more dismissive. Okay, so that said, some of the things that are different between the anxious and the fearful avoidant attachment style is that the anxious is always in need. They need to be in a relationship, and their biggest fear is a fear of abandonment, right? And although the fearful avoidant also have a fear of abandonment, the way that they express this fear is very different. The anxious person will more, if they sense that somebody is going to abandon them or leave them in the relationship, they will more go towards that person and be more people pleasing them, or they become more clingy and more needy. Whereas the fearful avoidant will say, no, I can't take that, because they don't trust relationships. They fear relationships, really. They fear that they don't trust relationships. So their instinct is to pull back and distance themselves and isolate themselves. All right, so the difference is between the two are quite different, even though it's the same kind of a trigger that they may have felt that somebody might be abandoning them. The fearful will pull back, distance, isolate themselves. The anxious will go towards that person, move more towards that person, because they fear that abandonment. But the two ways that they respond are quite different. The next thing is that the fearful in a relationship, the fearful avoidant person will usually lean towards a more dismissive, even when they're, especially when they are paired with an anxious preoccupied person. And as I mentioned before, if they are with a dismissive avoidant person, they will more lean towards the anxious side. So they whereas with the anxious preoccupied, they are pretty much the same, neutral all the way, depending on whoever they're with. If they're with a fearful or dismissive, they will still be quite neutral and quite warm, and not dismissive or not avoidant or anything. They will just be just neutral. They the anxious towards fearful or dismissive, whereas the fearful will display more of a dismissive side with the anxious. All right, I hope that makes sense. The fearful also will actually, both fearful and anxious will sabotage relationships, but for different reasons. When the fearful avoidant starts feeling that they're becoming too close, they're becoming too vulnerable, when they're becoming too, as if they're really falling in love with this person, and they don't trust relationships, so they fear that eventually that person is going to see who they really are, because at their core, they really don't believe that they are worthy of having a relationship. They're not worthy of somebody loving them, let's put it that way. So they always have this fear that somebody's going to find out who they really are. And so when they've come to a place where they feel that they're just falling in love too much with this person, they will actually pull back. Whereas, and they'll actually sabotage the pullback, but what they do is they're sabotaging the relationship because they don't want it to go in. They fear it getting so close. So instead, they've sabotaged it by doing things like cheating, or just causing arguments. Causing arguments to happen, and also they will flirt a lot with maybe of course members of the opposite sex, and they'll just make your life miserable, because what they're doing is sabotaging the relationship before you can actually dump them, because they just feel that for whatever reason they have this fear of that they have this fear of trusting relationships, and so they will always pull back. But the way they sabotage it is by doing things that are destructive, and sometimes it's not something that somebody can get past. The things they may say to them is very insulting and very nasty and very cruel, and so they are really sabotaging the relationship because they trust that one day that person is going to leave anyway, so they don't want to be the one left, so they sabotage it so they can have an excuse to leave. Whereas when the anxious sabotages relationships, it's more out of fear of abandonment. I mean, the person is, they fear that the person is pulling away. They see some kind of indications in their mind, and so they kind of now become, but instead of, they will now, instead of what the fearful avoidant does, the anxious will basically, they will actually start going back to the person, because when they pull away, it's almost like a test. It's not because they really want to leave or really want to cause any problems, but it does cause problems, of course. But the fear is that somebody's going to abandon them. So what they try to do is now they try to sometimes they flirt with others, or they do, well, I don't think they go to the extent as a fearful does, but usually they will flirt or they'll threaten to leave. But when they see that the other person is kind of like really now just kind of tired of this, maybe because they've gone through it before, and they see that they're pulling away, now they start to chase after that person and cling to that person and become very needy and people pleasing and do everything to kind of hold on to that person. So it's really almost like a test that the anxious is doing, whereas with the fearful, they're not really testing. They are really just totally scared that they will be dumped, right? They just don't trust relationships. So they really just fear being dumped or being left, and so they will just leave. They will be the first to leave to avoid it instead of being left. So the next thing is that the fearful avoidant attachment style individual is quite okay staying single for long periods of time because they don't trust relationships, right? Whereas the anxious preoccupied individual will always want to be into some relationship, no matter how shallow it is or toxic it is. They will stay in relationships long after you know, they recognize that this is not the relationship for them, because they just need to be in a relationship with someone. It's where they get their validation, or where they just have this need to cling on to someone, which is why a lot of individuals who are anxious stay in toxic relationships for long periods of time and suffer a lot, you know, before they. And usually the person who will leave is the other person, but they are the ones who will just stick it out and stay there, because they just, if the person doesn't leave, they will stay there, right? So that's the difference between the fearful and the anxious. You will hear a relationship with a fearful avoidant attachment style being described as hot and cold, because they are always kind of, yes, I want to be with you, but when it gets too close, because they fear that you're going to abandon them or leave them, or, you know, or not, or find out who they really are, because they really think they're bad and something's wrong with them. They're somehow not enough, and so they will leave. So it's a pull and push, hot and cold kind of a relationship. Whereas the anxious is really pretty steady in actually just holding on to the person. You know, they're not going to leave unless they're trying to do that testing thing when they sense that somebody might abandon them. So I think basically that's a big those are the big differences, guys. I hope you learned something from this short video. And if you did, please like my video, because it does help to kind of spread it for YouTube to kind of show it to more people. So it helps my channel to grow. And also please subscribe. That way, as soon as a new video is made, you will get notified. And also hit the notification bell. All right, guys, so this is Christine, your relationship and mindset master doctor, and your leverage for change. Take care until next time. Bye-bye.